Okay, let's jump right into another video here. So, today's topic, I'll come right out and say it. It's going to be DIY. Now, this is a broad topic, obviously. And I've already talked about a couple of these. I've talked about this topic in a couple of ancillary ways. But more specifically, I want to talk about like my last video, taking care of yourself. DIY is more than just, assembling kits or fixing old stuff or doing things yourself according to directions, Not to pat myself on the back, but when I was a kid, one of my favorite toys was Transformers. And even as a young kid, it was like, to me, I had this ethic where I was like, I'm not looking at the instructions. I'm going to figure this out for myself. And if after I have exhausted all possibilities, then I still haven't figured something out, then I'll go back and look at the instructions. But I feel like you get a more intimate connection with objects, especially complicated objects, if you just try to figure it out yourself first. Let your brain work. Sometimes you'll find new applications for things that the creator never even considered. I build weird electronic things, and I've been selling them for the last 20 years. I started out building like modified children's toys. Yeah, children's musical toys I would modify into really strange abstract musical instruments for adult age children. Some of them were more complicated, and as I got older, I started developing tube amplifiers and effects units and whatever. Some things were modified, some things were stock designs. This upset a couple of people, but most people after I explained it to them, they understood. It was like, I never included full instructions with the unit. Now, if somebody came back to me later and was like, I can't figure this thing out, what's going on? I don't know what to do. I don't even know where to get started. Yeah, of course, I would send them pages and pages and pages of instructions and even personal help. And, I was never avoidant of instruction. I just felt like these things were so strange and so complicated to begin with that I would just kind of like make it like a toy in a toy box. When you're a kid and you walk up to a friend's toy box and you pick a toy out to play with, it doesn't come with instructions. You've got to figure out what you're going to do with it, right? And that's how I felt about these designs. Was this is just a new toy, and go run wild with it. And it worked. A lot of people. Well, first of all, almost nobody ever complained, and even the people that did complain. Once I explained it to them, they are like, that makes sense. And they actually kind of appreciated it. Often they would come up with things they could do with these, like I said, very complicated devices. They would come up with things that they could do that I hadn't even considered. And if I had given them the instructions and they had just followed the instructions, they might have never discovered these new applications. So I felt like it was more than just a mental exercise. It was a way of developing new ideas. And man, that's the whole point of my life so far, is developing new ideas. Is why I'm doing this channel right now. Is I feel like I have a lot of ideas, and being a bit of a hermit, I don't often get a chance to put my ideas out there. I'll hang out with certain people and kind of flood them with ideas all at once, and sometimes they come back and can keep up with me, but often it's just a deluge that people are like, what? But like later on, they'll come back and they'll ask me questions to further what I had brought up. But anyway, you can see yourself by watching my videos here that I think about a lot of different stuff, and I'm doing my best here to kind of focus each video on a single thing. And in person, I don't almost never do that. This is definitely an exercise in me trying to hone my ideas. Anyway, DIY. Look, most modern technology, unfortunately, is designed to be used up and thrown away. You know, you look at computer electronics, you even look at appliances, you look at tools. Things have gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and they're designed to fail. Like there's I don't want to mention the actual name because I don't want to get sued, but there's a certain tractor making company whose colors are green and gold or green and yellow. You might be able to figure out who they are. And they specifically, like there was some kind of crazy class action lawsuit, or there should be, or there's talk of it. I'm not sure. I don't own a tractor, but I was talking to someone about, you know, the DIY aesthetic and the de-evolution of hardware and equipment, and he was bringing this up as a specific point that they specifically de-engineered certain parts to fail, and they put these parts in places that were really difficult to get to on purpose. Then they went and made the information that you needed to get to these parts, to fix these parts, they made them proprietary, and they tried to hide that information from people. Now, they aren't the only company to do that. There's another company, a computer company that's named after a fruit. Yeah. And they've done the same thing. You know, at least from their angle, they keep trying to make stuff smaller and thinner and lighter. And as a part of that, they've removed parts that assemble and just thrown glue in there. Man, there's nothing I hate more in an electronic device than fucking glue. Glue has no place in an electronic device. Fasteners, you know, screws, even tiny, tiny, tiny screws. Yeah, that's fine. I hate glue. Hot glue. Look, if you're building your own projects, you're building your own electronics, don't let me catch you with hot glue. There's always a better option. I hate that stuff. Usually hot glue is used when something is poorly designed to begin with or poorly assembled to begin with. I mean, don't get me wrong, I see plenty of manufacturers using hot glue to hold capacitors on PCBs and to keep wiring from flopping around, but there's always a better option, guys. Always a better option. That's just a pet peeve of mine. I'll move on. But look, I started working on amplifiers, tube amplifiers, because I had friends that were in bands. I was a band manager briefly. Don't get too excited. I never made any money at it, and I also produced a few records that I made no money at. And I basically wore a lot of hats when I was in that position because I was working with bands that had no means, no money. I mean, they had good music and they had great fucking talent, but they didn't have the means to put money behind stuff. So, you know, being a friend, I was kind of a jack of all trades, and I was like, okay, well, I'm learning how to do this. I'm gonna learn how to do this, you know, for just about any option, from tracking to mixing to mastering to I had just gotten into booking when one band blew up. Anyway, I was like, I'm not an expert at this. I'm not getting paid to do this, but I will do this until someone comes along that's better at it than I am. You know, once we've got money to pay them. And because of that, I took on a lot of hats, and it got to the point with one of the bands where the band sounded good from their you know, their performance standpoint, but their tone, their sound was just blech. One of my friends in particular, he had just garbage for equipment, absolute garbage. I mean, literal garbage, actually. And I helped him take a broken guitar. It was some Chinese SG copy where the jack had literally broken through the body, and I fixed it with some epoxy and rewired it and fixed it up. And then his amplifier situation was pretty crappy, so I got an old hi-fi amp, an old hi-fi tube amp, and that's what started my journey. I got online and figured out, I was like, whoa, tube amps, because like I had done electronics as a kid, as a hobby, and I understood basic concepts. You know, I could read a schematic, which goes a long way. I mean, it's a whole language, and I at least knew the alphabet, and I could at least look at a picture and see kind of what was going on, at least the flow of what was going on. Anyway, I took this amplifier and I turned it from a hi-fi amp, and I took the whole thing apart and I rebuilt it and I made it into a guitar amp. And it wasn't 100% successful in that there were, I definitely overdid it. Like, you know, obviously looking back with what I know now, and this was a good 12 years ago, looking at what I did then, I bit off a little more than I could chew, but I still built a pretty good amplifier, and it sounded really good, especially with that SG. And I wound up using it to record an album that I'm still really proud of. And it did a lot of the work on that album, and it sounded good. And I kind of wish that amp was still around, because that was my first amp. It got left behind when somebody moved years ago, and anyhow, it's long gone now. But it was the necessity of the situation, you know, that made me go into a DIY stance. And I started realizing quickly, I was like, man, these tube amplifiers, you know, even a used one at a music store is pushing, you know, $500, $600, $700, $800 if for a cheap one. And, you know, and this is, like I said, this is a good 10, 12 years ago. And, you know, the brand new high-end ones were going for $1,500, $1,600, $2,000. And it was like, man, there's so much money here. And I remember I was reading an article early on that was talking about how the retail price of amps were based on the price of parts times 5 or 6. So I was like, wait a minute. That means a $1,500 amp has only got $300 worth of parts? I was like, does that mean that I could take those parts and assemble a $1,500 amp for $300? Well, I figured out that was true. And it was even better than that. And, you know, the prices have changed a lot since then, and, you know, no thanks to me. But I was able to buy older PA amplifiers, which were still tube amps. They were just built for a slightly different purpose. And I would take them and I would rearrange the circuits enough, and I eventually figured out it was just easier to just take the whole thing apart. Kind of like restoring a car. You know, I would be able to I would be able to do a better job by just taking the whole thing apart, cleaning everything, and then reassembling it back the way I wanted to build it. So I figured out that I could build these amplifiers for way less if I did all the work. You know, it wasn't so much the parts that were prohibitively expensive. It was the fact that these things took a lot of labor, and they had a high markup, and they had a lot of marketing behind them. And once you remove all of those other expenses and you're just looking at parts, yeah, it was a fifth to a sixth of the retail price. And that was pretty exciting to me. All of a sudden, I started snatching up all these old PA amplifiers, and I was able to get them from anywhere from $40 to $100 a piece. And, you know, I have a little bit of the OCD. I'm a bit obsessive when I get into stuff, and I definitely was into this super hard, super fast. And I started building up my own little stack of donor amps. And heck, I still have some amps from back in those early days that are still floating around. Even though I've had a couple of purges where I just sold off old projects to just kind of hit the reset button. You got to do that every once in a while when you get backed up on projects that you don't finish. And I have a really bad habit of getting like 90 to 95% done on a project and then getting bored with it and moving on before I actually finish and test it. It's like, to me, the design process is the most exciting part, especially the redesign process. When I can look at something and see what it has and realize in my head, okay, this is similar to this other product, and this other product is desirable because of this. And I can kind of do something where I can meet these two things in the middle where, okay, I can build this circuit, but I'm using these transformers. So I'm going to create some kind of weird hybrid that's not going to be like either one of them. It's not going to be like the original donor, and it's not going to be like the product that I'm trying to copy. It's going to be something different. And I never just make a straight clone. I'm always looking for ways to upgrade and modify those ideas too, and to try to create something totally new. You know, even though it might be a lot like this and it's borrowing a lot from this, it becomes something new. And I find that very exciting. And that's one of the things about DIY is that's the only way you're going to create those kinds of things. It's the only way you're going to create these original creations. And it's really exciting. And, you know, you don't underestimate what that can do if you're a musician. Or, I mean, this could apply for anything. You could be a knife maker. You know, you could be building, you know, houses. You could be, you know, a woodworker, whatever. You make things with your hands, you know, beyond just repairing existing things, which I think that's definitely the best way to figure out how things work, is to do repairs and to start with other people's work and see how see how things are made, see how they're taken apart, see how you know, see how design works. You know, once you understand design, then you can start to, you know, reimagine these things. And that's what I do these days. That's actually what I do for a living. And you know, if you want to check out my other YouTube channel, I'm going to have another new channel soon. Once I get past like 50 or 60 of these videos, I'm going to be going and doing a whole new DIY channel, an all DIY channel. It's kind of what I'm leading into with this video is, I'm going to be doing this DIY stuff, and I really want you guys to check this stuff out. Just as an example, I'm currently designing and going to build a camper out of a short school bus. And as part of that, I've been collecting bits and pieces over the last couple of years, and I'm going to start doing little projects one at a time for that. You know, it's going to start out with me taking this bus apart. I'm going to be rewiring it. I'm going to be making it into a little apartment, and you know, I'm going to be redoing all the mechanical and electrical stuff too. It's going to be a full resto from the ground up. And that's going to be the first focus of my DIY videos. And I'll eventually add, I mean, it probably won't be there right away, but I'll eventually add links to the description so you guys can check that out. And yeah, so full circle, do it yourself. If you have an interest in learning how things work, if you have an interest in saving money, if you have an interest in tools and you like building things and you like making things and you love the satisfaction of saying, hey, I made that, or yeah, when I got that thing, it hadn't worked in 20 years and I made it work. If you like these things, man, go for it. There could not be a better time than right now. You know, we're getting to a point where the future is going to look a lot more like the past, in that new stuff keeps getting shittier and shittier and shittier, and people have less and less and less money. And if they keep trying to impose communism on us, we're going to find ourselves like the Cubans did. And what did the Cubans do? The Cubans had the same freaking cars for, you know, since the 1950s, since the late 50s, early 60s. And they had to find a way to keep that stuff working. And you should see the lengths they went to do it themselves. Anyway, look, guys and gals, I'm not trying to be sexist here. The guys do tend to work with their hands a lot more. You know, guys are more into things, women are more into people. It's just the way things are. But hey, I'm not trying to push away the ladies. The ladies that are handy and can do stuff themselves, that is some sexy shit. So don't get me wrong, I love that. I'm just you know, being realistic about my audience here. Anyway, I still sound like a sexist. But look, I love you. I mean it. And until next time, thanks again.